So in early December 2025, India's entire aviation system didn't just have a bad day, it completely imploded. And we're not talking about a few delays here and there. No, this is the story of how the biggest, most trusted airline in the country brought the nation's skies to a dead stop, and in doing so revealed some deep, really dangerous cracks in the whole system. The question is, how did it all go so wrong so fast? Let's get into it. First, just wrap your head around the scale of this chaos. We're talking over 1,000 flights, not delayed, canceled, gone. Picture this, airports across the country, absolutely gridlocked with thousands upon thousands of stranded, frustrated, and furious passengers. A system that was supposed to be a symbol of India's growth was suddenly frozen solid. This wasn't about inconvenience anymore. This was about the failure of national infrastructure. And behind these insane numbers, you have to remember, there were people. Real people whose lives were just thrown into complete disarray. This one quote from a passenger stuck in Hyderabad, it just says it all, doesn't it? That feeling of raw helplessness that was spreading across the country. All the trust that had been built up over years, it felt like it was just evaporating, airport by airport. So that brings us to the central question we're going to unpack here. How could this even happen? How did the one airline that was literally synonymous with being on time become the very source of the chaos? Well, this was no random accident. It was a collision course that you could see coming from a mile away. And to really get it, first we need to understand the machine at the heart of the storm. Before we get into the failure, you've got to appreciate the sheer scale of IndiGo's success. I mean, they didn't just compete in the market. They absolutely conquered it. They built an empire on a very simple, very powerful promise. We will get you there, on time, for a good price, every single time. And this chart, this reveals something absolutely crucial. IndiGo's dominance. We're not just talking about a market leader. With over 60% of the domestic market, we're talking about a near monopoly. For millions and millions of Indians, IndiGo is flying. And that immense power, that's the key to understanding just how catastrophic things were about to get. So how did they build this empire? Well, it was a brilliantly simple and kind of ruthless three-step formula. First, the sale and lease back model. Basically, order a ton of planes at a huge discount, sell them for a profit before they're even delivered, then lease them back. Instant cash flow. Second, use only one type of plane, the Airbus A320. This makes maintenance, training, parts, everything way simpler and cheaper. And third, something called asset sweating, which is a fancy way of saying they turn their planes around in as little as 25 minutes. Keep them in the air, keep them making money. And you know what? This obsession with hyper-efficiency worked. It delivered cheaper tickets and incredibly reliable service. IndiGo became the gold standard. It was this powerful, unstoppable machine, a machine that everyone, and I mean everyone, believed was just too perfectly built to ever break down. Or so we thought.
But here's the thing about machines. Every single one has a breaking point. And IndiGo was flying directly towards a new reality, one where its greatest strength, that fanatical efficiency, was about to become its single greatest weakness. The conflict started with a new set of rules designed to protect the very people flying the plane.
So these are the Flight Duty Time Limitation Rules, or FDTL for short. The regulator was making them stricter to fight pilot fatigue, which, let's be honest, is a massive threat to passenger safety. The new rules basically said pilots needed more rest, a full 48 hours a week, up from 36, and it cut down on the number of stressful night landings they could do. The goal was simple: make flying safer for you. But for IndiGo's super-fast business model, this wasn't a safety upgrade. It was a direct threat to the entire operation. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't some out-of-the-blue surprise. The timeline shows the rules were announced way back in January 2024. That gave airlines almost 2 full years to get ready. Other airlines, they started adjusting their schedules. They started hiring more pilots. They saw what was coming, which leads to the billion-dollar question. What on earth was IndiGo doing? And this is where everything changed. Instead of preparing, reports allege that IndiGo did the exact opposite. They supposedly froze hiring for new pilots. Not only that, they actually increased the number of flights they were operating by 10%. And right up until the last minute, they were apparently lobbying the regulator, trying to get an exemption. It was an incredibly high-stakes gamble, basically betting that they were just too big, too important for the new safety rules to apply to them. On December 2nd, 2025, that gamble failed, and it failed spectacularly. The new safety rules became law, and the IndiGo machine, suddenly starved of pilots that it needed to legally fly its planes, didn't just slow down, it seized up completely. And the result was a nationwide, system-wide meltdown, all triggered by the failure of just one airline. And here's what that looks like in numbers. Just look at this chart. Their on-time performance, the absolute bedrock of their entire brand, just plummeted to a shocking 19.7%. This wasn't a bad day at the office. This was the complete and utter shattering of their core promise to every single passenger. And it all happened in just a matter of hours. The domino effect was immediate and it was devastating, right? A flight gets canceled in Delhi, which means the crew for the next flight is stranded there, which means a plane in Bengaluru is now grounded. It was a chain reaction of pure paralysis that spread across the entire country. And because IndiGo flies over 60% of all domestic passengers, when it failed, the whole system failed. There just wasn't anyone else big enough to pick up the slack. So, for a complete meltdown of this scale, a crisis that seems to have been caused by a deliberate choice not to prepare, you'd think the hammer would come down hard, right? Massive fines, suspension of routes. What was the penalty for holding the entire country's travel network hostage? And here it is. This is the real twist in the story. The opposite happened. The regulator, the DGCA, actually stepped in and gave IndiGo a temporary pass, an exemption from the very safety rules that caused the whole mess in the first place. Instead of a penalty, the airline that broke the system got a special hall pass to go back to the old, less safe rules, all in the name of stabilizing the network. So this just raises a massive question. Who is really flying the plane here? Who is at fault? Is it the airline that gambled with its own dominance? Or is it the system itself, a system that allowed itself to become so fragile that it couldn't actually afford to punish its biggest player? This is the blame game. Let's start with the regulator, the DGCA. Their job is crystal clear. Make sure that flying in India is safe and efficient. They are the referees of the sky. So while IndiGo was allegedly expanding its schedule instead of hiring more pilots, where was the referee?
Well, this number might just explain everything. At the time of this crisis, the DGCA itself reportedly had a 53% vacancy rate. More than half of its sanctioned jobs were empty. Now, that's not just a staffing shortage, it's a sign of a massive systemic weakness. The very watchdog that's supposed to be overseeing this multi-billion-dollar industry was itself critically understaffed and under-resourced.
Now, the pilot unions, the people actually in the cockpit, they don't mince words about who's to blame. They argue that this chaos was a direct, completely predictable result of IndiGo's management choices that prioritized aggressive expansion over making sure they could actually operate reliably. And they point out that other airlines managed the transition just fine, which proves it was absolutely possible to prepare. So, okay, why does any of this matter to you? Well, if you fly in India, this crisis affects you more than you think. In the short term, it caused ticket prices on other airlines to skyrocket. But the long-term question is way more terrifying. When a safety regulator bends the rules because of commercial pressure from an airline, what does that really say about the commitment to your safety when you're 30,000 feet in the air? Experts argue the real fix here isn't about punishing one airline, it's about rebuilding the entire system from the ground up. Some of the key proposals are making the DGCA a truly independent authority that can't be pushed around, creating a powerful aviation ombudsman to actually stand up for passenger rights, and maybe most critically, forcing airlines to prove they have enough pilots and crew before they're even allowed to get a flight schedule approved.
And all of this leaves us with one final, pretty chilling question. The IndiGo crisis exposed the dangerous paradox of being too big to fail. Because in a system that's so dominated by one company that you can't hold it accountable without risking a total collapse, it's not the airline and it's not the regulator who ends up paying the price. It's you,